No, we're just talking, I think.
13 degrees is fairly hot.
I don't know which way is on this.
Well, there's a lot shining this on.
The light's not shining,
Well, I think I think it's today.
which is maybe why it's unplugged. Because it's plugged in over there. The light just went on. Well, it's a bit tenuous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd say it's it. Let's put that one away. Let's see if we can.
Oh, yes, lots.
Yes, lights. So I think we might. So obviously that was the problem. I don't think this one was the problem when it was over there. I think we should just chuck it out. Might be the 3 o'clock message. Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
I didn't.
I don't know, it's just random message.
All right.
Yes, he did.
Did we do, what did we do in morning session? The Heart Sutra? Or?
Yes, we did Hudson.
All right, let's do it then.
Yeah,
Yes. It's pretty weird to add you when you're here.
yeah, feels good being here. Doing this,
Welcome back.
being in a dream.
I'm sorry. It's called Tanzania.
It's still not.
Okay.
All right.
Seriously, do you want to come closer?
I'm with it. I don't, unless I have got any like special sitting thing that you don't want.
No, not at all.
My God, protect my Joshua houses his house, scripture, next and goes and things as was understanding shines forth. Who teaches in 60 ways what a patience love of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in darkness, overwhelmed by their suffering. Dharma arises from the stupefied delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews our suffering wherever its path appears, clearing by the darkness of all. Trishul Madhurusha, princely body is along with 112 marks of the Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages achieving the highest perfection of Buddhism, who has been pure from the beginning, O Madhurusha, loving one for the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness and close the mind, enlighten our intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Yeah, let's do it in English. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest ascending. Accumulations I collect by listening to the teachings and instead of the Buddha to be able to benefit the whole sentient being. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest ascending. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of the Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, highest ascending. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of the Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings.
I'm going to be here.
You're happy there? Yeah, just
It's nice.
yeah, it's
Very jacket.
necessary.
Yeah, necessary.
Thank you.
Necessary.
Necessary.
It's a necessary evil.
No attachment.
No evil. It's necessary.
No attachment.
All right. Well, just for the people that are living at Sydney and probably enjoying colder weather, people here in Queensland complain about 13 degrees. Like in other places, it's a heat wave.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. So what should we do today? So let's do one I think, quite swift cover of secondary offense, and then look at what we've covered in the last couple of days, pull out a few points and try to just keep the summary of those points in our mind. One thing that kind of occurred to me when I was looking at not only the secondary offenses, but also at the outline for this material and some of the verses, is that it actually coming together in a really compatible way, because avoiding the secondary offenses within the Bodhisattva vow is essentially being conscientious. So it's being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings, but in a very specific way that is tailored to the Bodhisattva vow, right? So it's not just wrongdoing in general, it's also giving up activities that are based on a self-cherishing attitude. I mean, that also, of course, applies to the root downfalls, but also pretty much with the secondary offenses, because it seems that with the secondary offenses, we address many of our afflictive states of mind, not doing things with attachment or with anger and so forth. So we need to be conscientious about abandoning the afflictions, conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings, conscientious about cultivating virtue. All of that, I think, is covered to a great extent by the Bodhisattva vow and this, the 18 root downfalls, the 46 secondary offenses. So let's look at the next one. So number 13 says, if you make a mockery and laugh, actually, before we get to that, yesterday we spoke about voluntarily accepting a wrong livelihood, and we spoke about it in terms of the 5 wrong livelihoods. One of the interesting things that got me thinking about wrong livelihood in general is that Thupten Chodron in her commentary also spoke about other things that are regarded as wrong livelihood from a Buddhist perspective that are not necessarily included here within.
Things are like making weapons.
Yeah, being a butcher, being a fisherman, and so forth. So they're not necessarily included overtly or explicitly here within those wrong livelihoods that are the secondary offense of the Bodhisattva, related to the Bodhisattva vow. But I think that they're regarded as, in general, wrong livelihood, even if you don't have the Bodhisattva vow, in the sense that,
It's in the Eightfold Path.
it is.
In that presentation.
Yeah, it is in the presentation of the Eightfold Noble Path, or Arya Path. So, now, of course, the type of attitude that we develop towards, I think, others that do engage in those professions is not condescending or looking down on them or kind of thinking of them as evil persons. But I think that probably we start with looking at the way that we behave. So, if we look at how do we behave in a way that is more ethical towards sentient beings, towards a practice, a Buddhist path, and so forth, then, if we have a choice, we would not pick up such professions that come at the expense of other living beings. Anyway, that's number 12. Number 13 says, if you make a mockery and laugh, spout distracting babble, or try to make others laugh, and so forth, it is a secondary offense of making a mockery and joking excessively. So when you read it like that, it seems that basically it seems that overtly, it's like if you're acting like a clown, creating distraction or mockery, trying to get the attention of others, it is considered to be a secondary offense. But I mean, this is how I interpret that in a loose sense. Sorry? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm totally in hot water here. Yeah, and it's interesting because when Lama Tsongkhapa explains in the Lamrim Chenmo the 10 path of actions, when he gets to the path of action of lying, one of the conclusions that he draws is that you shouldn't tell a lie even in jest, which we do quite a lot, right? We mock around, and also there's a fine line between being totally uptight and being a good practitioner. I mean, particularly when you look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I think that for us is always like this shining light of example of, he jokes around, he makes jokes, he's really light with the attitude of others, so we can do that. But it seems that the type of secondary offense that is referred to here, this is the way that I interpret that, is creating a distraction not only in your mind, but also causing others' mind to be involved with a greater distraction.
I know that like, certainly there's the one about not lying in relation to the Dharma. I'm not joking about the Dharma. Not making jokes in relation to
Yeah, not making jokes
it's
with
definitely-
respect to the Dhamma. So you said that there is she said that there is one rule that you encountered that says do not make jokes about the Dhamma.
Yes, yeah. Like not even joking.
Hmm. So then,
that's what's it.
but then there's sorry? I think that the gray area is that I think that in general, rather, sometimes we have that tendency to look at the fine details and see whether in the fine details we're abiding according to the Dhamma or not. I think that I normally step back from kind of specific cases. Is that okay and not okay? And try to look at what are rules like that indicating, what is the message in those rules? So here when we're training the Bodhisattva conduct, we want to tame our mind and also tame the mind of others. If we create states in which others' minds are heavily distracted or subject to a lot of distraction with laughter, entertainment, and so forth, we not only not tame our own mind, but we bring about more disturbance in the mind of others. So we can joke around sometimes. There are times in which it's okay to throw in a joke. I think that, particularly when you look at, Lama Sopa Rinpoche also is quite kind of, is quite a jolly person. Yeah. No, so it's quite a jolly person, it's not that we have to be dead serious all the time, but I think that the message is not to create that kind of ways of distraction and confusion. Sorry? Yeah. Yes. So I'll repeat it to the recordings or to the people at home. So also, Geshe is also kind of a happy person, sometimes telling jokes and so forth.
But also with the distraction one, again, it's definitely not creating distraction to someone who's in meditative equipoise. But not sort of, which is about not disturbing them from their practice.
Yeah, not disturbing people from the practice in general. Yeah. Also, another thing that I've been reading a couple of commentaries on top of this one. One of them was focusing on us not creating distraction for others, but then another one was also speaking about how we should protect our mind from frivolous entertainment, like not being too subject to entertainment that is coming from the outside to the point in which our mind is also heavily disturbed or heavily distracted. Sometimes we speak about singing with abandonment, dancing with abandonment. We can speak of also kind of just, I guess, watching television on end and watching things that fuel our attachments or our anger, a sense of hostility and so forth. I think that particularly, I tend to get pretty distracted by movies and so forth or TV series. I know I'm not free from that. And I do sometimes, sorry? Well, sometimes one thing that is pretty kind of, that I notice sometimes is that when you watch movies where you have the bad guys and the good guys, you're pretty happy when the bad guys are killed or when they're being punished or being vanquished or whatever. And even if it's just a fake, even if it's just a story, still, I think that if I was a really honest and genuine Buddhist practitioner, I would probably try to stay away from something like that fuels my own afflictions and create those tendencies in which I'm happy when someone is being killed. If that makes sense.
I was having to interpret, I don't want any
Well, particularly, I think that kind of, it's easy when you have movies with the bad guys, good guys, to be happy when bad guys are losing. Anyway, so that's the 13th secondary offense. I think that it's, in some sense, you can say that it's open to interpretation, but I think that the spirit of it is very well understood.
Well, I think too, also part of the spirit of it is about not distraction and not joking around. It's about maintaining a sense of containing your energy and like focus, attention.
Yeah, containing your energy, focusing your attention.
Not tight, but
yeah.
But I don't know, I think that's times when it's really quite appropriate. Like today, when you said the 6 afflictions, like sometimes we have all been guilty of that, and then we share it and we have a little bit of a joke, like like the glorious guru. I just say guru. It's we've all got, and it's good to make light of it and not to be so.
Well, that was actually kind of, today was just unintentional, slip of the tongue. But yeah, sorry.
Precisely.
Yeah, but so I think that there kind of, you can definitely sometimes kind of throw in a joke, but I think that the spirit of it is just kind of, if you perpetually behave in a way that is distracting others, I think that that's the spirit.
because I think also too with that is always distracting others, always joking, because when you're with someone who's like that and you just want them at one point to listen to something seriously and not be joking about absolutely everything. Yeah, maybe in that way.
I mean, also sometimes, we have, like, for example, group discussions about serious stuff, Dharma stuff. If someone comes in and repeatedly tries to divert the topic into something that is like throwing jokes, takes the discussion away from kind of looking at certain Dharma points. It's within the spirit of this secondary offense where you make a mockery, tell jokes that cause this disturbance in the minds of others. Yeah. All right. So let's go back to the outline, which is here somewhere, probably here. So we're looking at being conscientious with regards to the training. I think that yesterday we spoke about being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings, how we think about negativities and downfalls lead to a lower rebirth, and it would be a waste of freedoms and opportunities, and it would be very difficult to escape that state of existence if we fall down to a miserable state of existence. So we covered that, and then we started yesterday in this tutorial, I think, to look at being conscientious about cultivating virtue. We spoke about verse 21 that says that as negativity is accumulating in the past are limitless, it would be reasonable to make effort in abandoning them. And we said that we've studied before, we looked at before it, the 4 powers of the antidote. So it is reasonable to make effort in abandoning them. We also spoke of point B, karma that leads one to take rebirth in the lower realms is not exhausted by merely experiencing suffering in the lower realms. We spoke about different types of result, environmental result, fruition result, result similar to the cause in terms of your experience, in terms of your behavior, but also continuing to create negativities while you're in a miserable state of existence, so that suffering will be perpetuated. And also it will be difficult to escape that state of existence in the future. So then point C explains the reason why it would be reasonable to make effort in applying the antidotes to negativity. One decides oneself if one does not make effort in virtue once one has obtained leisures and endowments. I'll try.
I have difficulties with that previous verse. That, once you get, my understanding is that once you are born, you get reborn and you go to a lower rebirth. I mean, this is news to me, that I'm going to be stuck down there longer because I'm going to be creating the causes, because I'm going to be doing the killing or whatever. in that lower rebirth to stay down there longer, potentially forever. Like, how can you do any purification in those lower realms? You can't do any purification. So why is it that, why don't you just get stuck down there? I mean, I thought at some stage you would finally exhaust the cause. But they've just told us that we can't exhaust the cause because we keep on, like...
Yeah. So I'll just repeat the question quickly to the people at home. So you said that you're stuck with that verse that says that we'll be remaining in the lower realm for a very long time in continuing to create negativities in those states. So it seems that you would be stuck there for a long time without an opportunity to be liberated from that state. And you thought that just once you're born in that state, then that karma is purified, and then you can.
Once you exhaust the causes.
Once you exhaust.
This verse tells us that we cannot exhaust the cause because we keep on creating the cause.
Yeah, so I mean, this point is also made by Lama Tsongkhapa in his Lamrim Chema when he speaks of, and I think that it's found in also other Lamrim texts that explain how once you are born in a miserable state of existence, it is likely that you will continue to take rebirth in that state of existence for a long time. And just by chance, you will be liberated from that, because to be liberated from that chance, you need to have, or from that state, sorry, you need to have a virtuous mind, virtuous state of mind, on the verge of dying in a miserable state of existence. So how difficult it is to have a virtuous state of mind in that, in that state of existence. So, of course, it's not impossible, because living beings do emerge from miserable states of existence and take another rebirth. But then when you look at a comparative estimate that you find in texts like the Lamrim Chema, then they say that, there's so many, the number of beings in the hells are like this, and the number of beings in the Preta realms and animals is like that. And so few are people that have a good rebirth, a pleasurable rebirth. And one of the explanation is just that kind of once you get to a miserable rebirth situation, it's like a vicious cycle that is really difficult to emerge from. And this is why one of the reasons for saying that finding a precious human rebirth is so rare. It is so rare also just from the point of view of comparison, but also what it needs, that slight chance of having this virtuous state of mind, being on the verge of death, to then be born in a pleasant state of existence. Yeah, it's pretty grim.
I think that's the point of the teaching.
Yeah. So Graham's saying maybe an enlightened bodhisattva might help you out. Yeah, bodhisattvas and Buddhas that I think go to the miserable realm to help others, but they help others in terms of, I think, if there are conditions that they can affect that will in some situation give rise to a virtuous state of mind in the mind of a miserable realm being, then they do that. I think that that's mostly the way that they can work. Now, we say that it is not possible to study and practice the Dhamma in those miserable states of existence. So I think that there is some discussion about nagas, which are classified as animals, right? So apparently there are nagas that are intelligent or that have some conditions, and maybe in their state of existence, maybe something can be done. But I think that this is just a kind of small portion of miserable realm rebirth, that maybe there is a possibility of doing something, but with the rest, it's quite unlikely. So Kate is saying, if we find ourselves in a lower realm, might it be just a good idea to keep sacrificing the physical body? I mean, the thing is that we don't really have the intellectual capacity to think of those things when we're in a miserable state of existence. I mean, we have, when you see, for example, how animals behave, then you have cases of animals, mothers sacrificing themselves for the sake of their offspring. So you have groups of animals where it is, I think that it is a type of animal behavior that some sacrifice themselves for the survival of the herd or the group. But it's still, I think, not something that is extended beyond that. And it is also very likely that when one is heavily tormented by great suffering, then it'd be more difficult to think of doing something that is really virtuous in order to emerge from that. I think that probably we can assess how difficult it is when we look at our situation. Now, there are situations where we're so tormented by great suffering, either physical suffering, physical sickness, where there is such, our mind is screaming with agony. How difficult it is to turn our mind to think solely positively in those situations. So we try, but still I think that if we look at our personal experience, we can assess how difficult it is. I remember that I had, a few years ago, I had 1 week of like terrible toothache. It was between Christmas and New Year. I couldn't find any open dentistry. I called, I think, most of the dentistry on the Ascension course. I was on codeine and so forth, and just I couldn't sleep. I couldn't, my head was just pounding. So I did try to think about it from a Dharma perspective, but I mean, honestly, it's so hard when kind of the pain is so acute. So then think about how it would be like if you were to be tormented by even a greater degree of suffering. I mean, and then there's also mental suffering, mental pain. I've never suffered from deep depression, but I know I can appreciate that, when you have deep depression, it's really hard to lift yourself up from that and think of other things. So now we can think of how is it for us in our situation as human beings, and then think that actually it's probably going to be just as difficult and likely much more difficult if we were born in miserable states of existence.
I was going to say, it's almost, so it gets at the previous point said, with when we fall lower, it's very hard to get out because the analogy you use with the toothache is we're overrun with that sort of pain, the depression or whatever it is. It seems like you just inherently grasping at yourself. So there's just going to be tons of moments of self-cherishing, strong, sort of non-virtuous karma about me and you. It's going to be even harder to sort of steer the mind from that. When it sort of just feels like I'm mixing the energy.
Yeah.
You can see it's not full flow or helping something. Just feels like 24/7.
So even with your incredible toothache, like in the animal body, you wouldn't know that could come to an end.
Yeah.
You're just like,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
They're miserable when they seem to have no concept of that.
I mean, particularly when we think of, when we have pain, at least there's something that can be done about it. We have medication, we have treatment. Also, we as humans take care of each other, whereas where you think of other living beings, animals and so forth, sometimes you come across a bird that is injured or a dog with a broken leg. If there is a vet around, then they might do something in order to alleviate the pain, but most of them are left to fend for themselves. So it's pretty grim.
Didn't you have any good drugs or friends with good drugs?
With happy drugs?
Yeah, well, really low, endo,
Well,
they didn't get it.
it was just a very strong painkiller that didn't really work. They didn't even make me happy. I tried that, it didn't work.
Well, I know toothache is pretty
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, it was pulsating. Anyway, so Dechen was making a comment with respect to karma that leads one to take rebirth in the lower realms is not exhausted by merely experiencing suffering in the lower realms, and we spoke about continuous. Yeah, thank you. It's a good good discussion to make. So then we have point C, the reason why it would be reasonable to make effort in applying the antidotes to negativities. And this is, you can think about it as part of the 4 powers of the antidote, particularly generating regret, turning away from faults, power of thorough application of the antidote. So we will deceive ourselves if we will not make effort in virtue, since one has obtained leisures and endowments in verse 23. That reads, if having found such leisure, if I do not familiarize with virtue, there could be no deception other than this, there could be no confusion other than this. Then one will experience suffering in this life. Actually, we spoke about it yesterday, the suffering of regret, particularly coming to the end of our life and feeling regret for not having done better. So again, there is a recollection of death and impermanence and karma that is required to this verse. So verse 24 reads, if having understood this out of confusion, I'm indolent afterwards, which means I procrastinate, when it is time to die, tremendous grief will rear its head. Then one will be tormented with suffering of the lower realms in the future. And why it would be reasonable to abandon negativities and make effort in virtue. In those two verses, the first one, it says, to be led again to the hell realms after having wasted a human life of leisure and opportunity would be utter stupidity. So just to look at those lines, verse 26 and 27. Having found by some coincidence this beneficial state that is so hard to find, if now while having knowledge, I'm once again led into the hells, then as though I were confused by mantra, the mind will be reduced to nothing. So what do you reckon we have meditated on freedoms and opportunities, right? Now we have meditated it, I think, individually to a certain extent. We also we think of death and impermanence. We also think of karma and so forth. And yet it seems that we're still not, I think, totally concerned about what will occur to us in the future. So what do you reckon is the problem here? What are we getting wrong?
It is as though our self-cherishing, our all-pervasive suffering, the all-pervasive self-cherishing, because that is what causes all our suffering, is just sort of saying, oh, yeah, I guess so. It's like we're not taking it seriously. We're not taking it seriously. And it's, the Catholics have been very good with that hell and brimstone and really getting the wind up us and being fearful. And this is the Buddhists that are trying to do the same here. But I agree with you. We've just got this sort of, it's not that, right, okay. I mean, that's the way we sort of like.
We take it too lightly.
Yeah, way too lightly.
And maybe not taking it too lightly, but it might be that you see some progress and it's better than it was. And so you think you're okay, like
It could be that too.
because things are improving. You think, oh, this is okay. It's not as bad as it was back then.
Yeah, I am improving, yes.
Yeah. And we only ever see it in the light of this life, but also because our non-virtue is so strong. And we were talking about it in the tube, various people raised the point that it's very hard to identify, like we were talking about, why is it we have to identify the afflictions? Because it would be very hard to, because they're so appealing.
Yeah. They tell us that our afflictions tell us they're friends.
Affliction, I said, well, you've never had desire. Oh, yeah, now I do. Because, they can be very seductive. You don't realise that it's an afflicted state of mind.
Well, it seems that, kind of if I try to make a point summary of why, for example, for me, I'm doing those meditations, but it's still that I'm not like absolutely in panic that might happen and I have to do something about it right now. I think that from the points that we are raising here and also from the point that we have here on the chat, faith is just not solid enough, short-sightedness and irrationality of human nature. Now, so first of all, there is an overabundance of the afflictions. They're very strong, and we still, they're very strong. We're habituated with them, and we still buy into them. We still kind of believe what they tell us, or even if we recognize them as afflictions, we don't necessarily immediately apply an antidote. Like, for example, I have a meditation practice that I need to do every day. I try to do it in the morning. So, every so often something comes up in my mind, attachment or hostility or whatever. So there are occasions where I think to myself, all right, that's attachment. All right, that's sense of hostility. But often I just stop with the recognition and not like immediately proceed to counteracting that. So it's like we can recognize those afflictions, but sometimes we're still kind of don't really see that they are not our friends.
It's sort of hard, isn't it? Because it's like when you realize you're in the same side, and that most of that being is made out of what you said, non-virtues. You then got to get your mind around the fact that a lot of my actions from moment to moment, and then without thinking of the previous, she says, in the 24-hour period, you must start creating a lot of virtue. Even if you're practicing, even at the start of virtue without that.
So even if you're saying that even if we practice virtue throughout the day, many of the things that we do are still kind of really not totally virtues. They're mixed. Yeah.
Our nature is made of those non-virtues. It's very hard to virtues and stuff. Like dishonest or just teachers like all
Well, I think that also together with that, it's, we do meditate on karma, we do meditate on future lifetimes and so forth, but I guess that we believe that those things work and exist, but still maybe there's like some doubt or some misunderstanding, some ignorance with respect to that. We don't see that directly. So
it's because we don't see it directly.
Yeah, so it's,
realized it.
Yeah.
We get it.
Yeah. So it's still hard to have like complete trust in what's awaiting for us in the future.
Well, I guess it also points out, haven't seen directly, what's that conversation? Haven't seen directly.
How you don't have the realization.
And all realization. Yes, and I guess what that is highlighting is that we spend far too much time meditating on the higher scope rather than on this lower scope stuff. Long and short, It's really, it seems to me, this stuff is essential to really have those lower scope realizations, to really have penetrated them deeply and have them in our bones, in our heart, before we can really, I think, do the higher scope. We tend to just jump, or I tend to just jump to those higher, they're the ones that interest me, they're the really flash, tricky ones, when really, these ones that without realizing something like this, we don't have the fervor, we don't have the energy, we don't have the merit to the causes.
Yeah, this is why they are arranged in that way. That's the very reason why you have, first of all, those stages that are shared with those of the small capacity, then those which are shared with the medium capacity, and the states of a great scope being.
I was just going to say, because they are afflicted states of mind, they disturb our minds, we don't want to go there.
Yes.
So we want to go to, just give me the one that feels good.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Feel good meditation.
I was basically going to say what you said, Carson. We have lower scale practices like in the land, so there's theory versions at the start, and especially in the rebirth. And then I think the next one is definitely where we contemplate the fact that we will die.
Yeah.
I think, as Jyoti said, we probably won't get the realization, but if we can get close to that, you'll have a stronger sense of urgency.
Yeah, so just going to summarize it just briefly for the people at home. So Jason is saying that, similar to what Chukila said, if we meditate on the steps of the path, beginning with those of the small scope, meditate on first human rebirth, death and impermanence, what are waiting for us in next lifetime, karma and so forth, then even if we don't realize it immediately, then we'll start to get closer and closer to having deeper trust and conviction and finally realizing the states, which I can then link it up also with a question I think that Olaf asked. Does it suggest the lower realms are more psychological? I think that this question sometimes comes up because we don't really understand how those states of existence exist, mainly because we don't see them. So when you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo, the way that it describes those states is very physical. It gives actually like his description is more like a physical state where you can find them, whereas Izones and other teachers say that actually you cannot find them in a physical place like Lama Tsongkhapa describes them. However, it doesn't mean that they do not exist like that. Then they give sometimes a statement from scripture comes up in saying that there are mere appearances of mere mistaken appearances, or mistaken appearances that dawn to the mind, which makes it also almost seems like the hell realms are not physical, but just kind of sort of mistaken appearances that dawn to the mind. So it's hard to know kind of, who are we to actually come down on a certain conclusion if we haven't really realized it with our own mind. So I guess that there is.
Include our own existence in that.
Sorry?
Because our minds are mistaken, we too, as humans, have that mere mistaken appearance that dawns to our mind.
I think that, you can probably say that, first of all, being a human being, if you have a certain psychosis, then you can experience things that are similar to those hell realms, even on the basis of having a body such as this. And you can see how it is created by appearances of mistaken consciousnesses, which sometimes also are related to some biological or chemistry or electricity, the working of pulses in our brain and so forth. In chemistry at uni, our lecturer set us this homework: calculate the probability of inhaling an atom from Caesar's last breath. Then in tutorial we were given the actual formula.
What was the formula?
Yeah, sharing is caring. Anyway, so whether it is just psychological or not, I don't know. Probably both and neither.
We can sort of see that reality is a possibility.
Sorry?
We can sort of see that a lower level of existence is a possibility for us. In the sense we can observe the animals.
Yeah, we can certainly see things like the animal realms and try to look at their suffering and think how it would be like for us to experience them. So it is reasonable to think of such behavior as a cause of delusion. So one thing that I wanted to add to those 6 lines, which I thought is also helpful, is, I'll find it.
I enjoy this commentary.
Yeah, this commentary is great. So I'll put it on the screen.
Yeah, it really goes in depth.
So if having realized or understood this, that I've completely deluded myself by myself, and that this is the great stupidity of all, since I did not practice virtue at a time when I obtained the freedoms and advantages, yet still, due to having fallen under the power of delusion and stupidity or confusion, because just as an antelope is fooled by a mirage of water, I crave sense pleasures, pursue gain, respect, repute, and the like. I carry on or continue as before, being faint-hearted or shying away from practice thinking. So I thought that this is also quite helpful. Sometimes we think someone like me cannot practice the Dhamma. That is to say, I cut myself off from my own opportunity to practice the Dhamma by thinking, since I'm not very intelligent, I cannot pursue today. Because I have great anger, I cannot pursue study. Because I have great anger, I cannot be compassionate. Because I have many distractions, I'm unable to be diligent, and the like. Devaluating myself, I'm wasting my human life and bringing about my own distractions. So I thought that this is also helpful in terms of understanding why is it that we're not kind of making a lot of effort. It's also that sense of looking down on ourselves or thinking that bringing ourselves down, how can someone like me do it? I'm not smart enough. I'm not diligent enough. This is way too hard. No, we sometimes believe those stories, don't we?
Well, Lama Yeshe says that's the most disgusting form of laziness.
All right, let's look at the next section, which is being conscientious about abandoning the afflictions. So, first of all, I think that kind of it's really nice to just keep in mind the outline, or at least the main point in the outline. If we reflect upon if we are being conscientious about abandoning the afflictions, then we need to reflect upon the disadvantages of the afflictions, how it is inappropriate to feel weary of the hardships involved in abandoning the afflictions, and to cultivate joy that it is possible for me to abandon the afflictions if effort is made. One of the things that Geshe-la introduced today in class was the description of what an affliction is. So I wanted to draw from the Logic text, which provides a definition of affliction. Actually, it's text of mind and mental factor. Then again, look at the causes for afflictions, the nature of afflictions, and the result of afflictions, because through that we think of the disadvantages of the affliction. So
when you say nature, especially cause, function, and result.
He also spoke about function, but he also spoke about the essence. So the function, I guess that the function and the result can be brought together. Let's see how we do it. All right. So that's the definition of affliction. So it is from the Compendium of Knowledge, which is Asanga's higher Abhidhamma. So there are two texts of Abhidhamma. There is Vasubandhu's Abhidhamma and Asanga's Abhidhamma. Vasubandhu's text is called the Abhidhamma Kosha, and Asanga's text is called the Abhidhamma Samuchaya, or the Compendium of Knowledge. So Asanga says the definition of an affliction is a phenomenon such that when it arises, the characteristics of being very unpeaceful arises, and due to its arising, the mental continuum arises as being very unpeaceful. It is. But I think that kind of, if you look at this definition and try to put it in a one-line description, what would you say? Sorry? It's a non-virtuous that the mind arises. Other people at home? The way that I think about it is, I think that it's similar to what you said, but also similar to what Chucky said. It is a phenomenon that disturbs the mind, or what did you say? It creates disturbance in the mind. Yeah, causes a suffering mind. I think that it causes a suffering mind. I think that leads to the result. But I think that there is this agitation in the mind. The mind cannot dwell in peace, because we can think of, for example, attachment. Now, when attachment arises, it can be very strong, it could be very slight, but the mind is already kind of edgy. It's not really peaceful. There is some disturbance. I mean, with anger, we know based upon a personal experience that anger is painful. But there's other states of mind that they're not necessarily painful. We don't necessarily see them as acute pain. Like, for example, doubt, afflicted doubt, or wrong views. We don't see them as being associated with pain, and still they create this disturbance in the mind. The mind cannot dwell in a peaceful state when
would be an intellectual disturbance. Intellectual disturbance would be those later examples you gave.
Intellectual disturbance. What do you mean intellectual disturbance?
Rather than a physical or painful one. Those, when you're talking about doubt and I forget the other one you mentioned.
Wrong views, afflicted views.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you have, afflicted doubt is doubt with respect to, for example, karma, past and future lifetimes and so forth. You have doubt that is associated with the afflictions that afflicts your mind. And then you have different types of wrong views, not only the view of oneself, but also holding a certain perverse mode of ethics as being supreme, grasping at extremes and so forth. So the extreme of annihilation, the extreme of permanence, all those different views are considered to be those that cause the mind to be not peaceful, but creates that sense of disturbance.
I think with that definition though, if you weren't a Dharma person, not only that when it arises it's very unpeaceful, but you could say, oh, that's a beautiful flower and I wish there were more flowers around. I mean, that's counting, or music, this is lovely. It's creating a sense of what you think is peace and enjoyment or relief or whatever. I think you need to add to this definition that the end result is disturbing the mind, does not produce, ends up causing suffering. In other words, this definition only makes sense if you have the understanding of all pervasive suffering.
I think that probably, I'm wondering, we have this definition. I'm wondering if you take this definition to the debate court and you debate it, whether it will be an exhaustive definition or like a sort of a general description of what an affliction is, and you'll still have to provide a more informal explanation. Like, for example, I could say that, for example, I don't like jazz, right? Jazz music. It irritates me, I can say.
Yeah.
So then would you say that it is an affliction because when jazz arises, the characteristics of my mind being unpeaceful arises.
That's
so
right.
Jazz is an affliction.
That's right.
Now, so I can bring such
Exactly.
arguments. Sorry for people that like jazz, but
Rabina would be horrified.
yeah, I'm sorry. I can bring up such arguments, and I think that if I do bring up such arguments, then this definition needs to be probably taken in a certain. I need to go in a certain way with that definition, and still, I think that it provides us something to work with. I think that kind of when we look at what the gist of the definition is, it is a phenomenon such that it makes the mind undisturbed. The mind disturbed.
Yeah, this will also add what Patient's saying. So it creates a disturbance and connects us with the states of suffering.
Yeah. So when we look at it from the viewpoint of causes, nature, and function/result, then causes, as Geshe said, the cause is ignorance. I mean, this is what we've been saying all along, right? The cause of all of our afflictions is beginningless ignorance. But actually, another thing that occurred to me is when you look at the process of the evolution of the afflictions, we said that first off you have ignorance, then an incorrect mental attention, and then an affliction arises. So you can say that this incorrect mental attention that we pay to an object comes at the back end, or at the tail of ignorance, and causes the arisal of other afflictions. But the root cause is ignorance. Right? So from the viewpoint of, and ignorance is an erroneous state of mind. So from the viewpoint of the cause of the afflictions are disadvantages because the cause is a mistake. It is an erroneous consciousness. From the viewpoint of the nature of the affliction, it's a disturbance of the mind. When it arises, the mind is disturbed. It is unpeaceful. So unpeaceful or disturbed state of mind is disadvantages. From the point of view of function, or from the point of view of the result, it connects us with suffering. And therefore it is disadvantages. So also when we look at the definition of an affliction, it says at the end, and due to its arising, the mental continuum arises as being very unpeaceful. So it seems that due to its arising, it gives us the consequence, the result of that. The mental continuum arises as being very unpeaceful, and even more so, it connects us with suffering.
That 7 joules of superiors there. What was that in the context of? It was really interesting.
Where?
And about that footnote.
It belongs to the previous explanation that is a summarized stanza to the discussion of non-virtues, in general. Despite having encountered the 7 joules of superiors, which means faith, ethics, hearing, giving, shame, embarrassment, and wisdom, that when found, bestow all excellent collection in this life and the next, one discards them and strives instead for the meaningless, like the toils of someone winnowing husk or how silly. Yeah, it's I guess looking at the disadvantages of non-virtue. So,
Yeah, I mean, it really it's highlighting to me that I need to do a land rim retreat. Particularly, spending time on those lower scopes.
yeah.
It'd be very beneficial.
So then in reflecting on the way the afflictions act to harm oneself, we know that they rob us of independence of mind and actions. I think that it was quite a nice or striking way of studying the day. Verse 28 says, since enemies such as hatred and craving have neither arms nor legs, and are neither courageous nor clever, how have I been used like a slave by them? And we can connect with this section, this verse from the 8 verses from Training the Mind. In all actions, I will check my mind or examine my mind. As soon as disturbing emotion arises, I will forcefully face and avert it.
We talked about that in Jude as well.
Yeah. Mm. So the way they bring us immeasurable suffering, not only in this life, but primarily because they send us to miserable states of existence. Like, for example, in the other commentary that I was reading, it says like getting angry at the Bodhisattva, which is, I think, a case that we often speak about. How creating negative actions in relation to those advanced practitioners, we create such negative actions that result in miserable states of existence. Then the time period in which they cause harm is unlimited. This is a discussion that we had at the beginning or in the middle of this dispute. And the reasons why it is inappropriate to befriend the afflictions. Geshe Sering used to say in a really, I think, inspiring way, says that those afflictions arise and they tell us a story. They tell us a story why it's actually good for us to have those afflictions, and we completely buy into that story, right? So we believe the story that anger tells us. We believe the story that attachment tells us, and it seems to us that they're really kind of, they support us, they're there to nurture us. So we can recognize, as I said, sometimes in our mind, we recognize that they're there, but we still don't immediately avert them, because there's still the tendency to think that my friends, they give me they protect me, they like me, they care for me.
You think too, especially when, as you said earlier, before attachments are not having to notice, it's not so looking for anger. So I think just because of the sheer amount of time we've been cycling, we think, it's just not for me. I just feel obviously this is where the happiness comes from, where attachment comes from. Instead of saying, this is exactly as you say, it's a projection, projecting onto something, thinking that the happiness comes from. So catching that.
You also, like I was thinking about what you're saying about attachment, because we're in a desire realm, so we're definitely in a society that's going to reinforce that as well. And so it does really take a lot of courage to see it, but then to maintain going against it when everything around you is supporting that afflicted state of mind.
I think that we can believe that anger is an unhappy state of mind. But, we all have been angry, or I think that most of us have been angry. So we know that it's quite a miserable state of mind, but it's harder to believe that about attachment. Yeah. It's still, when it arises, it still has this alluring presentation as if it is going to give us happiness. Alas.
Alas.
I like this word, alas and aghast. Okay. So the next point is to cultivate patience towards the afflictions is unreasonable. So the meaning I think that the meaning of cultivating patience with them, chocolate biscuits, yeah, I concur. So being patient with respect to the afflictions is unreasonable. Let's quickly just read through those two verses, 34 and 35. While in cyclic existence, how can I be joyful and unafraid if in my heart I certainly prepare a place for this incessant enemy of long duration, the sole cause of the increase of collections of harms? How should I ever have happiness if in a net of attachment within my mind dwell the guardians of the prison of cyclic existence, who become the slayers who kill me in hell, and so forth?
I mean, it's sort of saying that, we do it. I have done it a lot, everything's all right in moderation. I can keep a lid on this. It's all right, and I'll only kick the dog once a week, not every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we justify that to ourselves, that this is all right. I mean, I was just chatting about that today. And basically, it means that you can relax so much easier, and then it comes along and well, I'm going to get angry. And you can relax so much, and you're still keeping the seed there. You're still harboring the seed. But it's an excuse I've often given myself. Everything in moderation is okay.
Well, it says that here kind of we say the title is being patient with the afflictions, but I think that it is just the point in which we know that the afflictions are there, but we don't take the extra step to remedy them. We leave them as they are. So either we leave them as they are, or we also support them. We give rise to the increase of those afflictions. All right. So let's conclude this session for today. So we're going to have a week break next week. I'm going to send out some revision questions today and another exam in a couple of days towards the beginning of next week. For those of you who still want to do, if you have unsent exams and you still want to do them, then don't hold back, send them to me and I'll be nice to you. All right.
As long as you follow the instructions of no more than 5 lines for any one answer.
Yeah, people haven't been following that strictly. They haven't been taking.
You mean to say there's no test this weekend?
Well, dream on, as they say. Okay, Meg. Land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good.
Powerful, generous, contented, yet so please remain until samsara ends. Moral waves, including the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, spreading Manjuna's victorious doctrine. Magnificent prayers, honoring the three Gurus, protector of myself and others' disciples. Please live long.
I mean to say that changes.
All right. Thank you very much, people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. Thank you, everyone.
Just that's it.